Hey everybody, as many of you who at least are fencers on the Patreon channel are already aware, I just returned from a wonderful event over in Columbus, Ohio that was put together by the Columbus Saber Academy. Now, while I was there, I got to meet a whole lot of people that I had not met before. I got to fence a lot of people that I had not fenced before. And the thing I love about that particular situation is the fact that it allows you to fence against different body types that you haven't fenced with necessarily before, people with different reflexes, different strengths, different weaknesses. You get all of that as a great learning laboratory. But as is usually the case when I go to these events, I also did a fair bit of teaching. And after the tournament, I stepped off to the side and sometimes out into the parking lot with some folks in order to give them some instruction, both verbally but also as in the midst of the spar. Now, most of those folks I was able to work on, some of the typical things that I see as far as how they lunge, how they move, reflexes, parries, things of that nature. But there was one individual that I was giving an instruction to on how to lunge. Basically, he was questioning about how I was able to move as quickly as I do. And for all of the instruction that I was giving him, I could not seem to convince him that it was anything other than just a natural gift that I had for moving that quickly. Now, the thing that gets me about that is that he's talking to a man who's nearly 52 years old. And I can tell you right now that I don't move as quickly as I did when I was, say, for example, in my 20s. But for whatever reason, this 52-year-old man that he's fencing against is apparently superhuman and is able to move just as a natural gift of his own anatomy and physiology. Now, I can tell you that is absolutely not the case, especially at the age of 52. So what I'm here to talk to all of you about is how when you are moving, if you want that quickness, I'm telling you right now, quickness is a skill. It is not a gift. And the only reason that people perceive me to move as quickly as I do is because of the fact that there are numerous skills that I have mastered or at least gotten a very fair understanding and comprehension of, and I apply them together such that they work independently. Yeah, they're great as tools, and they certainly are going to help a fencer. But when they work together, when you've got a comprehensive understanding of all of those skills that goes into allowing a fencer to move quickly, I'm telling you, that is where true magic happens, and that is something anybody can learn. So as I mentioned, quickness is a skill. It is not a natural gift. Now, granted, you could have a natural affinity for moving quickly. Certainly, that's not to be discounted. But that is but one tool amongst a great many tools that allows a fencer to move quickly. And I can tell you, if you rely upon your natural gifts as a young person, as a young fencer, I'm telling you, that is something that's going to fade away with time. It's just not going to stay with you as your body continues to age. So if you truly want to be a quick fencer throughout the entirety of your fencing career, you need to learn the separate skills that goes into making a fencer quick in the first place. And here, I'm going to talk to you about those. So there are 4 primary areas that I utilize. And don't get me wrong, there are more skills, obviously, that goes into a fencer's repertoire. But if I was to break it down, there are going to be 4 areas that I'm going to talk to you about now that I use to primarily bring about that quickness that people perceive in me all the time. So one of them is being able to read tells. That is a skill that cannot be underestimated and should never be discounted. It is so invaluable. It is akin to basically your opponent having a neon sign above their head that tells you exactly what they're going to do just before they do it. Now, I don't know about you, but I have certainly found a skill like that to be a very useful tool in my fencer's repertoire. You too need to be working on that skill of reading tells in your opponent. And the way that you do that is you're focusing your gaze on your opponent right here, the center of the upper mass of the body. If you're watching right here, right, don't look at the eyes, certainly don't look at the sword, don't watch for the legs, don't try to see the whole body at the same time. Just focus your gaze right on the center of mass of the upper torso. If you do that, you're going to be able to see everything that you need to see. And in time, with experience, you're going to learn what all of the subtle movements that your opponents are making translate to just before the actual action begins. Everything from whether they're going to advance or retreat, whether they are going to attack or defend, whether they are going to stand still or move, everything you would want to know, your opponents are giving you as a tell. Now, can this be trained out of yourself? Absolutely it can. But I'm telling you right now, learning to read your opponent's tells, and there are a wide variety of different kinds, and some are big and some are small, but learning to read those tells is an invaluable tool that every fencer needs to have under their belt. I also utilize the reading of tells with minimal movement. If you were to look at it purely from a physics perspective, right? What is the shortest distance between 2 points? It is a straight line. If you travel any other pathway on your way to that second point, obviously you're traversing more distance, which means you're traversing more time. In fencing terms, every time you do that, you're giving time to your opponent. So when I am moving, I am doing so with the minimum amount of movement necessary in order to accomplish the task. Whether that is parrying my opponent, I want to make them miss me by inches, if not less. When I am attacking my opponent, I want to travel the shortest path always, never taking anything more than what is absolutely needed for distance in order to attack my opponent. When I do this, I am ensuring that I am getting done in the least amount of time. Does it help for you to be naturally fast in these instances? Yes, but like I said before, this is just one tool. If you truly want to be a great fencer, if you truly want to be a great swordsman, then you need to master how to parry, how to attack, how to move with the least amount of distance required to get the job done. The third thing that I employ when I am leaving my opponents with the impression that I am so quick, so fast, is that I fence according to in-between time. Now, this is a concept that I named because of the fact that it is a time in which your opponent commits to an action, and every time they commit to that action, they must finish that action, and then at the end of it, there is this slight pause. It's very minute, but as we all know, in fencing terms, in fencing time, you only need a fraction of a second in order to execute said parry, said attack, said maneuver, whatever the case is. In-between time is a concept that describes that pause at the end of every motion that your opponent does. And if you're curious about that, by the way, in fact, if you're curious about anything at all that I'm saying, you want to have more information on that, look to my YouTube channel, look to the videos that I've posted exclusively to this Patreon channel, because I am speaking about something that I have already talked about in those videos. Don't try to master it all at once. Don't try to do it all at the same time. Simply learn each of these skills, focus on them, and as you get a certain level of competency that you feel is being of use, then perhaps reach into one of these other skill sets. But for the time being, speaking only of in-between time, this is a skill that I use against my opponents all the time. In fact, during the last Patreon video coaching seminar that we just did for this last month in November, I talked exclusively about in-between time, and I gave some examples through the sparring through showing sparring videos of how exactly I make use of that and how I take advantage of that in my opponents. It is something that is extraordinarily useful. If you can learn to attack your opponents in those time frames when they are frozen, it's a fraction of a second, but that's all you need. If you can learn to use that time, it makes you appear like you're moving 2 and sometimes 3 times faster than your opponent. And you will leave your opponent with that question that I've heard so many times, man, I saw that attack coming and I just stood there and I don't know why. Well, I know why. It's because of in-between time. Lastly, the fourth concept that I employ, the fourth technique that I employ that makes me appear so fast is my no-tell lunge. There is a very specific technique, whether you're talking about yourself as a high guard fencer or whether you are like me and you are a low guard fencer, there is a technique to lunging that I call the no-tell lunge that gives your opponent the absolute least amount of time to respond. Again, this is something that I've already spoken to in other videos, and there's even footage of me demonstrating this at a slow speed. If you can master this, if you can get this to the point where you no longer have to think about it, it just is a part of you, it just feels right, you're able to do it without thought, I'm telling you, you are going to reduce the amount of time that your opponent has to respond to you significantly. So as I said, these are the 4 basics that I use in order to make my opponents, and for everyone watching the bouts for that matter, make them think that I am so much faster than my opponents. But I can tell you that is not the case. Quickness is a skill. It is not a gift. And I can tell you that from the certainty of the fact that I'm coming from a 52-year-old man's perspective who's been fencing for a very long time and is using these skills in order to put them together. Focus your efforts on mastering these skills, and I'm telling you, you're going to improve your ability to strike your opponent and their inability to strike you back significantly. Don't try to do them all at once. Take one at a time, work on them. If you have questions, you can reach out to me at any time. I am more than happy to help you where I can. But if you can master these 4 skills, I'm telling you, your skill set overall is going to improve a whole lot.